Alright, hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba. It's time for the Armist Inquisition yet again, episode 269 on Sunday, the 12th of February 2023. Broadcasting live during Operation Bluebeam.
Okay.
Well, it's either that or the Anunnaki have returned
Okay.
and they're dropping UFOs all over the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, you were just telling me about the UFOs. I was unaware.
Yeah, we might come to that later. Anyway, I'm Phil.
I'm Matt.
And tonight we're joined by Keith Hunter, the deconstructor of occult physics. How are you doing, Keith?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Thanks for joining us. I've been really excited about this one because I was going through your website. Our mate Matt from the Apocalypse YouTube channel put us onto a while back, I think when he came on the podcast maybe, and he'd been referencing your work, and that led me to your website, and there's an absolute ton of information on there about all these sort of strange esoteric subjects.
I thought his work, I've seen his videos on his Apocalypse channel. I thought his Atlantis find, I thought was absolutely brilliant. And personally, if I had a gun to me and say, what is the location of it? Every man and his dog's got an answer for that. But I think he's got the answer. I think that is decisive. That underwater anomaly dimension seems to fit. That's why I did an essay on it on my own website. But what I did was I looked at it in terms of kind of what you might call Earth grid analysis, an analysis of the placement of it, because there seem to be connections between various sites, like the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, in some Chinese pyramids. There's some very interesting connections between many different sites around the world, and how the arc, the Great Circle arc length connections, linking them up, appear to have special ratios, which are very basic and very exacting, that decisively for me say, hey, this is not due to chance, and there's a network, and that somebody who placed them there did have that exceptional knowledge of the true dimensions of the Earth as a true Earth ellipsoid model. And I think the interesting thing about us today, science-wise, is that we have now got to the point where we are able to map the Earth ourselves, and we've got to a certain level of science where we are able to now understand some of the things from the past that were a mystery to us, and they were purely a mystery because we just didn't get that scientific level to be able to figure it out. And it's the same with things like esoteric calendar systems, like that's also something I discuss on my website, like the Mayans and how they target special conjunction patterns centuries or even millennia in advance, which on a precise day do trigger a kind of resonant agitation of the solar system. And those, again, we can only reconstruct those because we have now got accurate models of the solar system, and we can wind it back. Just right. Guys like Velikovsky, for example, his book came out in 1950, and he came up with a few research dates, brilliant dates. So he literally put in his book, he said the 23rd of March, 687 BC, and there was one, I think it was 26th of February, 747 BC. Velikovsky could not, in 1950, plug in his PC, press the power button, and load up Starry Night Pro and wind the solar system back. If he could, he'd have seen some amazing conjunction patterns on those dates. But because he didn't, his research went in a certain direction, which I think was in error. And so he got part of it right, but we're all trapped in time. I mean, even I have to say there's certain research avenues that I can't go into because I don't have the necessary skills to model certain things mathematically, especially. But there are certain programs like right now which do allow for advanced analysis of it. So one of the things I was really interested in are the ideas of ancient measurement systems, especially even of astronomy. I mean, geometry literally means earth measure. And it was all about, did the Earth once have 360 days per year? It was one of the critical things, and I was thinking, because it's now 365 and just under a quarter. And so I was interested in this. And then I got looking at the measures that we map on the Earth, and looking at, say, the metric system of kilometers, and then looking at imperial measures, and looking at is there some way to deduce an ideal Earth form as the Earth expanded, or, you know, as it changed?
Right. Yeah.
And what does this say about an ideal system of measures that might be mapped onto it? A lot of researchers out there have tried to look at various structures, and they use angular measures. They assume, hey, we're going to split up the Earth into 360 parts called degrees. Each one of those is minutes of arc, you know, 1/60th of that, and then seconds of arc, 1/60th of that. But they're using an ideal system over an Earth which has actually expanded, when what they need to do is work out what the correct ideal arc length measures are and use those. And that was that's what I talk about in my book. I literally go in depth into this, and I show that imperial measures, as we understand them, as we use them today in Britain and even in America, because they borrowed it from us kind of. The foot unit, as we have it today, is a brilliant unit, and it is tied into the ideal Earth orbit involving a 360-day orbit, and also the ideal Earth form. That's one of the things I found. So I was very interested in a lot of the research about Earth grids and connecting up various monuments, and that led me to look a lot into the issue of what's the ideal measurement systems and how are these structures linked. Because one of the things people are interested in is patterns. They want patterns. One of the books out there, for example, that I looked at Earth grids is this one here. I got this from Adventures Unlimited Press. And it talks about all these different guys with various grid patterns. Like, so you've got this dodecahedron, icosahedron grid, you know, things like that. And one of the guys in here, his name's Bruce Cathy. And, you know, he himself wrote some books. And again, I got through Nexus magazine about 25 years or so ago. And one of his books is this one here, The Energy Grid. And Bruce Cathy's my big hero, you know. He's another guy like Velikovsky, trapped in time. He modeled things a certain way in his calculations, assuming a spherical Earth model, because back in like 60s when he were doing his research, you know, it's like it's pen and paper, isn't it? And if you would say to somebody, you've got a true Earth ellipsoid model, you've got one latitude, longitude coordinate, you've got another one, work out the arc length. That is a laborious mathematical calculation. And personally speaking, I don't know how to do it. But I do know how to go on a little website where somebody's already got the programming there and just plug in the coordinates, and presto. Even I myself could never have achieved the research I've done if I weren't relying on these brilliant little discoveries technologically. So that's the kind of thing that I was looking at there. And so what I wanted to talk about is some of the very advanced things that are found in terms of precision. I do see a lot of the researchers out there that have gone into this area, and, you know, all due respect to them, they tend to be modeling it incorrectly using angular measures over an assumed spherical Earth. So when they're trying to make these connections ratio-wise, linking up various things, they're not getting the precise ratios and they don't see the right patterns. Right. Bruce Cathy himself, through a brilliant deduction, got the crucial pattern, at least partially correct, but he went down a wrong research path with it, and he failed to make certain breakthroughs. And I effectively followed on from him. So if you want to bring up the first slide, and I'll get into I'll get into what he actually found here. So
you know, Keith, when you say an ellipsoid model, when you say that, do you mean the fact that the Earth's wider at the equator than it is at the poles?
Yes.
Right. Got you.
If you think about an Earth, if you've got a pure sphere, obviously the radius is the same in all directions. Because the Earth is spinning, it's got an axis of spin, and so it compresses at the poles and expands. Yes. So if you think about a two-dimensional ellipse and you just rotate the whole thing,
right,
that is the correct model of the Earth.
Cool.
Right?
Got you.
So this is why elliptical geometry is far more advanced than normal circular geometry. And whoever positioned some of these megalithic monuments, they had to have had a true knowledge of ellipsoid geometry. Wow. So if you look at this slide here, then this is one of the things that set Cathy going in his research. Because Cathy, you know, he lives in New Zealand. Well, he died a few years back, but he's from New Zealand, right? So he spotted an article in the New Zealand Herald, 5th of December, 1964, of this weird aerial, which I believe is something like 2 or 3 miles down, you know, under the ocean. And it was, I think it was a US survey ship called the El Tanin, so it became known as the El Tanin aerial. And in this article, they literally gave you the precise coordinates of it. And he's looking at this weird structure with all these little little lines like cross beams across it. And he thinks, what if they're all like aligned to some global pattern? And this is like a nodal point of where it is. And so he basically deduced the grid pattern that you see on the right of the screen, right? And you see we've got like a polar pattern here, but what you've got here is effectively a cuboid grid matrix, where imagine you've got a cube sat inside the Earth, and you've got 8 points of the cube touching the surface of the Earth, right?
Yep.
So you're going to have 4 in the northern hemisphere, and you're going to have 4 in the southern hemisphere. And what Cathy found was, what he deduced, he thought that this aerial here was positioned at one of the 8 corners in the southern hemisphere, nearly 60 degrees south. And he thought all these lines, they must refer to a global pattern. And so he basically connected up what were effectively the 8 points of a cube within the Earth with a series of great circles and small circles. And that's the kind of pattern that you get there. Okay. I will just say, I say it's a cuboid. Cathy never seems to have completed the pattern fully because he missed the cube itself within the Earth. And that completes the total number of cross beams. He only seemed to get half of it. He got the great circle and small circle parts, but he didn't get the rest of it. But the other point is, and this is the crucial error that Cathy made, and it's right there in that diagram. He thought that this was some kind of energy grid pattern which was aligned to the magnetic field of the Earth, right? And so you can see in that diagram there that point A is the geophysical axis of the Earth, and he thinks that point B, when he constructed it, is going to be the magnetic north, right? So he aligns it there. This is his mistake. He thought this pattern was unique, linked to the magnetic field. It is not. This is a pattern that is linked to megalithic structures, military bases even, and all you need to do is look at different cuboid forms depending on the latitude of these structures, and it gives you different great circle arc lengths, okay? And so this is what I'm going to show you here about the high precision involved here, because this is where we go further with Cathy's work. So do you want to bring on the next slide?
Just before we talk about that next slide, can I just ask, this might be a really stupid question, but the aerial, is that actually a structure, or is that a pattern that they found on the seabed floor?
No, an actual structure. This is the thing. I know there was some controversy of it, and the US Navy tried to say it was a plant, basically.
Right.
They literally said it was a plant. But what Cathy was saying is, no, this looks like a proper artificial aerial. And it was captured almost by accident by an undersea survey by this US vessel.
Right. Okay.
And so that was the image. And they gave you the coordinates, but they put up a story saying it's actually a plant. But no, the precision of it is so incredible. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I said about the
made
foot.
of unobtainium.
I was just about. I was thinking exactly the same thing.
I was talking about the foot unit as being exceptional and how certain things are tied into it, right? Well, if you've got this latitude south, 59 degrees, 8 minutes south, and if you were to look at the Great Pyramids, northern latitude, right, which is 29 degrees, 58 minutes and 51 north. If you look at the arc length separating both of two, pure latitude arc, it comes down to practically dead on. I think the sequence is 324,000. It's like really precise. It's almost like 25 feet or so off that. Really precise stuff. And it's got an intriguing connection, this aerial, to the Great Pyramid. But if you go into the slide with Great Pyramid, then, so let me just show you the initial one here. This one. I've got a few essays on Great Pyramid, but this is the introductory one, where I talk about the builders of the Great Pyramid possessed highly sophisticated mathematics, right? And they knew the true dimensions of the Earth. They had to position this where they did. And they obviously knew how to get to those locations. And this implies that it's a global civilization. So if you just move on to the next slide.
Sure.
This here then is basically, you see the bottom right, the coordinates. I got them straight out of Graham Hancock's book, actually. They're the ones he uses. Right. 29 degrees, 58 minutes, 51 seconds of that north, and 31 degrees, 9 minutes east longitude, right? So imagine then, here we've got the Earth ellipsoid, And where that little triangular point is there, that's the Great Pyramid positioned at this 29, 58, 51 north, right?
Yeah.
So that's where it's positioned here. Imagine it's sat right there then at one of the 8 points of an internal cuboid, right?
Yes.
So
I can see it. Yeah.
If we just move on to the next slide, I'm going to go there. What you've got here then, if you just first look to the one on the left, I've got rid of the cube and I've used some great circle arcs that connect up those 8 points, right? So that those 8 points are there, but they're now established via a series of great circle arcs that all connect up the points, yeah?
Right.
And so what you've got then here, and this is the key point I want to talk about, how there's certain special relations of this pattern. I haven't given you the whole matrix of all of the great circle arcs, and I haven't given you the small circles ones. I've just extracted, I'm just showing you partially what the pattern is, just because otherwise it'd be really complicated, that pattern on the left. But if you then look to the pattern on the right then, I want to draw your attention then to the position where the pyramid is located, right? Position A. And if you look, we've got the 4 upper points of the cuboid, A, B, C, and D. Mm-hmm. And there's a great circle arc which connects up point A to point B, right? To the adjacent point. And that's marked X, right? And you can also notice the Z, which is just to the left of that. That is the elliptical arc from the equator to the Great Pyramid. Mm. And so what I did was then, using that latitude for the Great Pyramid, you can put all this into a precise Earth ellipsoid model, the most advanced we've got, the WGS84 model, and you can work out what the X dimension is, right? And if you multiply that by 4, you're effectively adding up the arcs A to B, B to C, C to D, and D back to A. So you're 4x. If you move to the next slide, now you can see then right at the top there, it says 4x, and the answer is 28,917.36136 miles. These are all very precise values, you know.
Yeah.
And then you've got the latitude from the equator, which is that 2,061.702612 miles, yeah? And all we're doing is a simple ratio. Just divide one by the other. And you can see the numeric sequence in bold there. It's 10.14567340. Now, why is that so intriguing? It looks like a random thing. Well, if you know your astronomy, and you can see it at the bottom of the slide right there, if we take what is the precise value of the Earth tropical year and divide by 360, this ideal, you get the same sequence. The decimal point's a different place. It's 10 times different.
Yeah.
But it's practically the same sequence. And you might ask yourself, what kind of error are we talking about here? What adjustment to the latitude of the Great Pyramid perfects that ratio sequence? And the answer is an adjustment of just 50 feet latitude-wise. If we just shift it 50 feet, we get that perfect ratio that matches the value of the current Earth divided by 360, but just with a decimal point there. And again, it makes you think straight away, what are the odds of that being due to chance? Practically zero. It's so precise, you know, and the actual number of feet for the circumference of the Earth is something like, it's literally about 131 million feet, right, you know, for the full circumference of the Earth. So if we're talking about a 50 feet difference to make that perfect, you can see we're dealing with really fine judgment calls. And this is why I say to you, you know, when you're looking at a lot of these connections, assume the ancients were geniuses, okay? Because when you are studying the positions of some of these things, you seem to get incredible ratios of high precision. And again, I'm using like our most advanced models for the Earth, you know, in terms of locating them. And then we're just examining the ratios connected to different structures and different components to the Earth itself, the Earth dimensions. And you get these incredible connections like this. So it makes you think, no way is this due to chance, you know? Well, so I want to move on to the next slide.
I was going to say, Keith, that 50-foot difference, I mean, the pyramid itself's like 400 feet wide.
And it's 756 feet. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like internal. It's like within the pyramid itself dimension, you know? So
and that 50 feet discrepancy could well be down to the modern software, the modern surveyor, the satellites, you know?
Well, it's not so much that, it's even the model itself. If you take the WGS84 model, it's based upon a precise value that they give for, say, the equatorial radius of the Earth, and also measure flattening of curvature. If you just ever so slightly tweak some of these, very slightly, just change a couple of slight numbers, that itself can dynamically change everything. So, it's within tolerance for the model's accuracy itself, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to show you something quite amazing. What I've just demonstrated then is that we appear to have a cuboid grid pattern that appears to be connected to the Great Pyramid, an ancient megalithic structure. Well, it turns out that various military facilities, covert bases, they are positioned in such a way as to make you think they were constructed at their own positions, again, for the purposes of establishing one of these patterns. And they are actively established. I mean, I totally believe the Great Pyramid was a device that was meant to be set into vibratory motion. We've all seen these videos, on the internet where people have got some kind of vibrating metal plate and they sprinkle some sand on it, yeah? And when they vibrate it and it gets to certain key frequencies, amazing patterns start emerging, like circular patterns, lines, and whatever, yeah?
Right, yeah, cymatics.
I think the Great Pyramid was deliberately meant to be positioned where it was, set into vibratory motion with internal equipment to literally establish that cuboid pattern. And that these lines are lines of true energy, if you will. I don't think they're of the electromagnetic spectrum, possibly scalar beams, but I do think it's a real energetic pattern that resonates with the Earth. That was the whole point of it, yeah?
Right.
And what you've got here are some bases which appear to be doing the same thing. So these are from Google Earth. And again, anybody can go on Google Earth, zoom right in on these coordinates here. These are like the center point coordinates of significance, so the biggest buildings in these complexes, yeah? We've got the latitude, longitude coordinates for a Signals Intelligence Base, which is a US base in Menwith Hill here in the UK. It's one of these bases where you've got the big golf ball things, with the radomes in and that kind of thing.
See them there, yeah.
And over in Australia, you've got a kind of sister site, again, big golf ball things. It's the same thing. The thing about Australia, though, they built a shaft into the ground about 6 miles deep, and they've got some kind of thing going up and down or something, like a pulsating the Earth. Again, it's like what Tesla was trying to do.
Find an aerial there.
Yeah. So something there is being deliberately built to kind of create a vibratory motion, right?
Wow.
So if you've got the coordinates here, I'm going to show you a critical connection between them, and again over the true Earth ellipsoid model. So do you want to move to the next slide?
Are we going to see a black helicopter outside soon?
Yeah, might do, yeah. We might wake up in a FEMA camp at this rate.
So this is where, if we consider Menwith Hill to be located at point A at 5400 30.70 north, okay? And again, we've got that embedded cuboid, which naturally is formed because the minute you select any point on the Earth, you can immediately say, okay, that's the point of a cuboid, so all the other 7 places fit into it, yeah?
Yeah.
So if we position that there, we've got Menwith Hill at position A, and it's at one of the corners of the cube. Its reciprocal point then in the southern hemisphere is exactly the same latitude, but just southwards, yeah? And so the great circle arc of the surface of the ellipsoid Earth connecting up A and B is position M, okay? And that is the precise value you get there in feet and also statute miles. So move on to the next slide. This one is for Pine Gap. We're looking at a different component, right? Because Pine Gap's a lot nearer the equator, the cuboid within it is a lot more squashed, yeah?
Right, yeah.
And so if we put Pine Gap and say, okay, Pine Gap's at point C, that's at the latitude 2347.56 south, yeah? Minutes, so it's degrees, minutes, and seconds south, yeah? And we look at the reciprocal, or rather the adjacent point, D here, just across from it, and we look at the great circle arc connecting up those, that's got a value of X, which you can see there's that 2946 figure there at the top, yeah? So if you go to the next slide, if you do a simple division sum between these components, you get this value 1.3333, 519. And again, it's like almost perfectly the fraction 4/3.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? What kind of error rate adjustment here? Again, we're talking about literally, I think it's like 100 feet or something silly like that. If you adjust to the position of one of these structures, that ratio is perfect. So you know how with resonant agitation, it's all about fitting wavelengths into a whole number of times into a larger wavelength, to get resonant agitation. So this tells me that there will be an active communication linkage between the Pine Gap site and Menwith Hill through resonant agitation, that they could do something at Pine Gap with that aerial, say, excite the Earth. And because of the close harmony, that the grid pattern at Pine Gap interacts with the grid pattern, the cuboid pattern hanging on Menwith Hill, and you get that connection. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right, so that's similar to sort of like if you play a certain frequency at a crystal glass, it'll shatter.
It's the same kind of thing, yeah. So right. Again, it shows you that the placement of these structures is in no way due to chance. Yeah. But you will only see these relations if you're modeling them in terms of a true Earth ellipsoid model. Otherwise, they're invisible to you. If you try modeling these things, with a spherical model, and you just plugged in the same latitude, longitude coordinates, they're not as perfect as these. You wouldn't see this like 1.333. You wouldn't see all the threes there and think, I know what that is. That's 4 divided by 3. They can be degraded to such a level that you may even miss the crucial connections. And this is what a lot of researchers out there do. They miss the crucial connections because they're not modeling things correctly themselves in terms of the true model. But this is the kind of thing. So these white slides here are diagrams and screenshots directly from my book. Right. The other ones for the Great Pyramid from my website. But I go into both of these structures in more detail in my book. And so just one other thing I'll just mention this in passing. If you take the direct Great Circle arc between Menwith Hill and Pine Gap and you divide it by 3, and then you take the equatorial circumference of the Earth and divide that by 8, you will get the same value. It's about 3,100 miles or so. But the thing is, the wavelength value, if you consider it as a wavelength, right? Consider that as a distance value as a wavelength. It is actually, when you use the speed of light and you use that as a wavelength, the frequency is just slightly under mathematically 60 hertz. Okay. 60 hertz is the power grid thing in the US. Yeah. And so there's your connection there. So You've got a couple of connections. You've got the latitude placement of Pine Gap, connecting it to the Earth grid matrix of Menwith Hill. And then you've got the longitude placement, establishing that connection to a 60 hertz power grid thing. So you can see how precise these structures are positioned, so they had to, and I understand that the Australian government, there were a guy who was a private landowner and he owned the land around Pine Gap, and the US government wanted it. So from what I gather, allegedly they made this guy an offer he couldn't refuse, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They needed that plot of land, otherwise these connections wouldn't work, So let's see now. If you want to go to the next slide.
Okay.
This is where we take things to a whole new level. And again, this is following on from Bruce Cathy's work. So one of the most fascinating things about the Earth grid patterns and the Great Circle arcs connecting up various things, right? We could take the coordinates of 2 structures like Pine Gap and Menwith Hill and evaluate their positions relative to one another. But these are fixed structures on the ground, right? One of the things that Bruce Cathy found was that you could do the same kind of evaluation with respect to nuclear weapons, right? And this is where things get very dynamic, because if you've got a nuclear weapon, let's say you're doing a surface test, you've obviously got your bomb at a certain position on the ground, yeah? That's the fixed point, right? Yeah. But what he found was that when the devices were activated, if you looked at the position of the sun mapped onto the Earth, right, the coordinates of that, he found that the arc length measures connecting up those 2 things also seemed to be of a special type that implied it was not due to chance. They were choosing to set off tests when certain arc measures were established, okay, which is quite fascinating.
When you say the sun, what do you mean by the sun mapped onto the Earth? I don't follow.
That's what that diagram is on the left, and this is what I'm just about to show you, right? If you take the Earth, as you can see there in that diagram on the left, we've got the equator of the Earth, right? if we right now, for the sake of argument, freeze the solar system, freeze the rotation of the Earth and the orbit of the Earth,
right,
and draw a straight line from the center of the Earth to the center of the sun.
Oh my word.
That line will pierce through the surface of the Earth.
Right.
And so that gives you the coordinates, the latitude, longitude coordinates of the sun positioned on the surface of the Earth. Yeah. That's what that little image of the sun is there on the left. Do you see it? Yeah.
Yes, I get it. I understand now.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And so imagine then you've got a bomb position like in the diagram there. Yeah. And that's located, you can see with the circle with a cross in it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so imagine you've just triggered your bomb at a certain precise time. If you freeze the solar system, then you'll have a great circle arc connecting up the bomb to the sun. And that's that D. That's the arc length D, yeah? You may also look at the arc length from the latitude of the sun up to the latitude of the bomb. So it's not a direct one, but it's just a pure latitude separation. That's L, right? So, and if you look to the diagram on the right, you'll see a few other connections. You could look at just say the pure longitude separation between the sun and the bomb, which is E, okay? And you can also look at the separate latitudes to the equator for each of them. Basically, all those arc lengths which are in bold, all of these appear to be, employed when people are triggering nuclear weapons. And so I'm going to show you now a series of, and this again, it's a very precise analysis that makes use of the most advanced Earth ellipsoid models we've got for the time, 1950s. It's going to make use of the declassified nuclear archives, and I'm going to show you some of the most prominent nuclear devices out there which have been detonated. And we're going to use the US Naval Observatory's own software. That's what's involved in these calculations. So it's the most, unimpeachable sources of info here. So if you move on to the next slide, then I'll show you what I mean.
I'm excited.
Got a nice image here. So if you look to the top left, it says King, USA. King is the code name for this specific test, and it was carried out in Eniwetok Atoll in the Pacific. It's the 15th of November, 1952, and we have the precise time when it went off in universal coordinate time, and it's 0.5 megaton. And King stands on record as the highest yield pure fission device that the US detonated. It was a free fall bomb drop, and they let it fall, and just when it was about to hit the ground, then it blew up, right? So we've got the bomb coordinates there, latitude and longitude in the middle. And using the US Naval Observatory software, if you plug in that precise date and time, you can work out the coordinates of the sun mapped onto the Earth, yeah? Yep. And if you look at the diagram too, the image to the right here, I've actually positioned you. See, the bomb location is in red, and you've got the sun ground position. It's kind of near where New Zealand is. You can just see New Zealand at the bottom. And so that yellow line is the great circle direct arc of the surface of the Earth, connecting up those 2 points when the bomb goes off. And because the Earth, right, when the Earth's rotating, right, at the equator, it's 1,500 feet. The sun is moving longitudinally 1,500 feet or so. It's about 1,524 feet, yeah, per second, okay? So this is a dynamically established arc length, because when they trigger the bomb, right, they do it, and then the sun, wherever the sun is mapped onto the Earth, the arc length is established. It is fleetingly established, the arc length, because it's changing all the time due to the rotation of the Earth, you see. Yeah. So the thing is, when they set off these bombs, it immediately fixes what that arc length is, right? So if you move on to the next slide, this one here is Shot Bravo, the highest yield nuclear test the US has ever conducted, 15 megatons. And this was in 1954, 28th of February. It's at 1845 universal time. Again, we've got the bomb coordinates from the US declassified archives. And if you use the US Naval Observatory software, you get the sun coordinates, right? And so again, I've done a nice diagram to show you where they were both located. It's Bikini Atoll, and the bomb is in red, just on the globe there, just near to the left-hand side. And then you've got the sun ground position. So this is a big arc length here. And again, this is fixed in time. The minute they triggered the bomb, at that time, that arc length was established, okay?
Yeah.
So here's the money shot. Do you want to move on to the next slide? You've got the two great circle arc lengths in orange in boxes. And if you do a simple division sum, you get the answer 2.666625 or so, which is the ideal fraction, 8 divided by 3. And the error rate, about 200 feet. So what do we conclude from this? Do you think this is due to chance? No. They basically, when they did the Bravo test later on after King, they said, well, that arc length that we use connecting the sun to the King test, well, we know that's an important arc length. And so what we're going to do is we're going to divide it by 3, and then we get a crucial component there we're going to use, and then we multiply it by 8, and we're going to do the Bravo test, and we're going to trigger that bomb at such a time so that the direct arc between the sun and the bomb is 8 times that, that ratio. You understand what I'm saying? That component. And again, you've really got to wrap your head around it. Split second timing. Remember, longitudinally, the sun sweeps out about 1,500 feet every second. The error rate here is about 206 feet. So it tells you that when they were doing these tests, and this is just one example, I could give you loads, they seemed to want to do them when the sun was in a certain special relationship to when the devices were triggered. And what researchers have pointed out is that they think that the position of the sun actively affects the yields of the devices. And so they were doing this to ensure that the yields were boosted in some way via a kind of resonance, So that's where they were coming from here. And it's an astonishing find. Again, this follows up from the work of Bruce Cathy. Bruce did his own, he did a couple of, tests he put in his books. But I've got to tell you, again, he's modeling in terms of a spherical Earth. Bruce would never have seen these relations here because you need to use a true Earth ellipsoid model. But they're staring you right in the face there. So this, again, is covered in my book. In my book, there's like a 60-page chapter. It's the longest chapter where I give you pages of analysis of nuclear devices. Because what I do in my book, I start out with looking at the solar system, ancient measures of expanding Earth, etc. And then we go into ancient megalithic structures like the Great Pyramid. And then we go into the bases like Pine Gap and Menwith Hill. I got into other NSA bases like Buckley Air Force Base as well. And then we move on to the final chapter, which gets to research onto nuclear weapons. And you see how we go from the static to the dynamic, and how you've got fixed locations on the ground, where you've got these relationships which are present, ever present. And then you get the ones which involve the sun itself moving over the Earth and how they're fleetingly established. And somehow they're trying to use energetic blasts like nuclear blasts in order to, trigger boosted yields for nuclear weapons. It's really fascinating how this, research develops. But then we get into the realm of artificial earthquakes. Before we go there, let me just point out one thing. I don't have the slides for this, but just to reiterate the point. When Hiroshima was bombed in 1945, August the 5th, a fascinating thing, this one. Again, we've got the coordinates for Hiroshima. Even Cathy puts them in one of his books. We've got the declassified coordinates. So we know exactly what the target was. We know the exact time that the device was activated, right? If you know the precise time, the date and time, you can work out the position of the sun, right? And so it turns out that the position of the sun, right? If you just look at forget the latitude, you just look at the longitude of the sun relative to the Earth, right? When Hiroshima was blown up and that device exploded. And then you look at the pure longitude of Hiroshima itself. It turns out that the equatorial great circle arc of pure longitude at the equator is exactly 1/6 of the full equatorial circumference of the Earth, right? 1/6 of the full equatorial circumference, which is astounding. And again, the bomb itself is in the air for 43 seconds. So every second that passes, the Earth's rotating about 1,500 feet is passing, And then it turns out that when that bomb is activated, that arc length, longitude-wise, between Sun and Hiroshima, 1/6. Again, margins of error, a couple of 100 feet or so. Do you know what I mean? Like 1 second of timing error. And the bomb's in the air for 43 seconds. You've really got to wrap your head around it. Okay? But again, that's all on record. Anybody can reconstruct that. And I do in my book. If you want to go to the final slide, though, this is where we have something very fascinating. I know it's a bit of a, as I put it, an info dump. But, if you look to the top right, what this slide is all about is the famous, infamous Japanese earthquake, the magnitude 9.0 that caused that Fukushima meltdown, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, the time of it is taken straight from the official Australian government, which actually they took it from the USGS, US Geological Survey. So you get 11th of March, 2011, 5 hours, 46 minutes, 24 seconds of time. And the coordinates, again, longitude and latitude, right? Well, again, using some astronomy software, we can work out the position of the sun at the precise time. And that's shown in terms of Greenwich hour angle and declination. That's under the image of the Earth itself there. Yeah. But basically, that's where you get the position of the sun in terms of latitude and longitude. If you look at the Great Circle Calculator blob or square to the right, then you can see all we've done is we've put latitude and longitude for the coordinates of the earthquake, latitude and longitude for the position of the sun, and it works out the distance, right? Mm-hmm. And all we then do is we do a simple thing. We take the full equatorial circumference of the Earth in feet under the WGS84 model and divide by that distance connecting up the epicenter of the earthquake to the sun. And you find that it's 1/6. It fits in 1/6 into the equator of the Earth, right? Again, split-second timing. The errors on this, a couple of 100 feet. Bearing in mind, you're looking at the precise moment when the earthquake was triggered, and that's when you work out where the sun is, because it's a fleeting reaction. It's a fleeting distance. That dynamic change of the arc length is changing all the time, yeah? So, again, this shows you straight out, that earthquake was not a natural earthquake. It was actually a resonant-based blast that was engineered deep underground. And again, it uses the same kinds of technology as is used with nuclear weapons. So it's interesting because people like to encode messages. I think it was about 6 or 8 months after this earthquake occurred, there were some conspiracy stories floating around that a secret underground base had been hit in, I think it was Virginia, maybe. I think it was in the US somewhere.
Langley.
Yeah, and it was an earthquake. We just registered in the US, basically just, they do their earthquakes. And so they registered some earthquake. I think it was 5.2 or something like that, in this place. And some people pointing to it and saying, hey, that earthquake there, that actually, there was an underground base that took out some bad guys. You know what I mean? And it was just something like this, like 6 to 8 months later. And you're thinking, okay, is this story absolute bollocks or what? But here's the thing. Turns out, if you look at the timestamp of when that earthquake occurred in Virginia, it was 5 hours, 46 minutes. It was the same 5 hours, 46 minutes as you'd see for the Japanese earthquake. And so the implication was, and I spotted this, I didn't see anybody else spot this, but that's like payback. They did it deliberately. They had the same technology and they decided to take out a base underground and let the US know, we know you did this earthquake here. So we're giving it in the same timestamp. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So there's that to consider as well. So that's, again, this is other aspects of the technology. So the slideshows, obviously, you want to just take it off screen now. We can just look at each other. So my research then, it looks at these high precision relations, and I do try to get precise coordinates of things of interest, whether it's a military base, a megalithic monument, or if it's something else like bomb blasts, or earthquakes I'm analyzing. And I find that if you use a true Earth ellipsoid model and you start to use arc length distances, connecting them up, not pure angular measures, but you just look at the distance measures, you'll find incredible ratios, and they allow you to at least reconstruct some of the science behind it, and even some of the intent behind it, like with the timestamps, you know. There's a lot more I could say on that. I did a video for my YouTube channel, and it was literally called "A Secret Nuclear War is Happening Right Now," and that's a 2-hour video. And the slides I showed you there for Bravo and King are taken from that. I give you all the stuff about North Korea and their nuclear weapons programs, and that they seem to have scalar beam technologies to trigger earthquakes underground. And there were 2 earthquakes, you know, that occurred suspiciously, and they were in the mainstream press off the Korean Peninsula, one to the west and the other to the east. And people were saying, "Oh, it's that Kim Jong-un. He's triggering some earthquake weapon." And do you know what the fascinating thing about it was? The timestamps of each of these earthquakes were 19 hours, 48 minutes, right? And you're thinking, well, what's the significance about that? Well, firstly, if you draw a straight line, a great circle out between these 2 epicenters, it seems to cut almost dead on the border between North Korea and South Korea, right?
Wow.
And do you happen to know what year the partition occurred that split up the continent? 1948.
Oh, my word.
And so that is in that video. And this is what he did. He's using the timestamp. This is why I said to you about that Japanese earthquake one.
That's mental.
The earthquake went off at 5 hours, 46 minutes, and the seconds, yeah. But that other one that occurred, everybody was saying, was an attack in the US, counterattack, effective, take out the base. Same 5 hours, 46 minutes. They like this encoded messages, you know, with timestamps. So it's astonishing that video. If I just look at that video, there was even one. There was a US military base. I think it was an airfield base. It was in China something. It was literally called China something. I'd have to check it because I looked at that video a few years.
China girl.
China something in the US. And again, so there was a massive earthquake or some explosion or something. They just did a big cover story. It was a big devastating earthquake, 7.0 whatever, and it wrecked it all. I did an analysis of that. And again, that seems to be purely artificial. So you've got countries. It's like I said, the title of the video is "A Secret Nuclear War is Happening Right Now." You've got countries attacking each other, but they're not doing it by ICBMs flying through the air. They're doing it by triggering nuclear blast-sized earthquakes underground. You know, when you look at a 7.0 earthquake, I think that's like it's like a 50 megaton bomb or something. There's a table, again, it's in my book. It's a table. There's some formulas that convert yields from earthquakes to
megatonnage,
Richter scale magnitude, say, to the TNT value for nuclear weapons. There's some conversions, but when you look at these earthquakes here, these are the equivalent of extremely high yield megaton devices. And some of the timestamps, again, it allows you to see how they're all cleverly at war with one another and sending messages hidden in plain sight, if you know what I mean, if you just look at them. So that's the kind of thing that my research looks at. So I do think that some of these grid patterns, the cuboid grid matrix appears to be decisive in a lot of megalithic monuments, in connecting them up. And I think, as I said, Kathy's the first person to deduce it. His only error was, well, there were a couple, but the main error was he thought it was a pattern solely linked to the El-Tannin aerial, and it was aligned and associated with the Earth's magnetic field. Right. He didn't look at that pattern hung upon any other items. If he had have done, it would have just gone, his research had gone in a completely different direction, but he never made that leap, and he wasn't using a true Earth ellipsoid model either. So there were connections we completely missed. So that was where, his research just seemed to not go anywhere further than that, but he would have made some amazing further connections. I'll give you another one example. In my book, I talk obviously Pine Gap, Menwith Hill. Yeah. Well, there are other NSA bases out there that have been built, right? And the Great Pyramid, they always say it's famous for being aligned to the cardinal points of the Earth, north, south, east, west, very important. And we've got all these, these arc lengths up from the latitude, pure latitude, up to the equator. And, the dimensions of again, one of the relations is if you take the physical base which is just a slight touch under 756 feet, and you take the elliptical arc from the equator up to the pyramid itself, base size, fits in practically 14,400 times. Yeah, 14400. So this is, again, an important thing about a lot of these structures. To achieve this resonant agitation, especially with pyramid-type bases, they build the structures to be of certain dimensions that harmoniously fit in to components of the Earth, yeah? So, if the US were to, like, say, we're spending like hundreds of millions of whatever pounds or billions or whatever to develop a great big massive new big gigantic NSA base, we're going to spine our ass off on everybody, it'd kind of make the news, wouldn't it? Yeah. But here's what they've done so cleverly. That Tesla organization Elon Musk has, yeah, that gigaplant, that massive, great big, which is aligned amazingly enough to the cardinal points of the Earth. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No.
I did an analysis of it. That is a straight-out NSA facility, masquerading as a car plant. I'm telling you now, there's no doubt secret layers to it, and I would imagine underground chambers that are going to be off limits to normal people. Yeah, it'll be building a few cars or whatever, but the global position, it ties in to the other facilities like Buckley Air Force Base and, the ones I've just mentioned, with Earth, arc length measures of great significance, and the dimensions of it fit in as well.
Well, one thing we know about
certain components.
Musk
that is, again,
he's famous for working with the state and relying on government subsidies for his companies. He's very much tied to the public sector.
Exactly, that's the thing. This is why he's been propped up like crazy, because that gigaplant thing, all this stuff about electric cars, it's all massively subsidized. And then when you look at it's actually more polluting with all the infrastructure to charge them all up, and more petrol than it is, with normal petrol cars. It's all a scam, really. But it's another one of these things that just allows the government to artificially subsidize something like a great big massive plant here. So he's taking the money in, and again, Elon is probably he's been told, hey, we'll back you, we'll give you all this money and all that stuff, but we want a certain section of your big plant that we want to use for something else, and you just stay out of certain areas. It'll probably be that kind of deal. You know what I mean?
Black budget.
It's the same with rocket stuff. He was taking over certain NASA contracts. I think this guy, at some level, he's one of these billionaire guys. They reach a certain level, and they realize, to go a bit higher, they have to do deals with the devil, so to speak. Shady contracts or whatever. Yeah. And I think this is why he knows at some point. This is why I think he does stuff like buys Twitter just so he can try and expose some of this stuff. He feels guilty. I personally think some part of him, it feels like he's got to say something, against the man. The man. He's got to exactly. He knows he's done this kind of deal, so it's like it feels like he's trying to clean his soul up a bit. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That's all I can say about him. I think he's just a guy that he needed certain things, and he's trying to expose some of the corruption, but he can only do it in limited ways because he's in bed with these people. He's got to be careful how far he takes it. But I do think that's the story with Elon. But that basically that gigaplant thing, I looked at dimensions, I looked at positioning. It's just straight out NSA facilities, no doubt about it.
You're going back to your cuboid model.
Yeah.
Have you tried pegging it to either Göbekli Tepe or the Recat structure and found anything there?
I don't think Göbekli Tepe. I don't think I have. Recat structure. I've tried looking at that, and I don't think I found anything. This is the interesting thing about it. We've got to have a proper structure, if you want to put it that way. Like the pyramid, because you see that, like the Great Pyramid A, it's a big, massive thing. It's got internal, everything smacks of machine, and it's built to precise standards. I avoid artistic structures, like, for example, the Sphinx. The Sphinx for me is more of an artistic structure, not an energetic device. So when I've looked at Göbekli Tepe, from what I gather, it seems to be more of an artistic sort of structure. I know some people compare it similar to Stonehenge, but it's not. Stonehenge, absolutely, I found relations with Stonehenge.
Oh, right.
Because that does appear again to be built to certain precise dimensions. And, that's in my book as well. The analysis links it to the Great Pyramid. It's part of the same kind of network. So I found there, but Göbekli Tepe seems more an artistic thing. I've not found anything there. The Rishat structure is one of these bizarre structures that if you were to ask me off the top of my head, what do I think it is? Have you seen some of these, I think it's more an electric universe type thing. We talk about electrical discharges hitting them. And they say some of the things that people attribute to meteor damage is not, but it's like a massive electrical discharge through space hitting something. And that can cause certain patterns. I suspect, just my opinion, I suspect that Rishat structure is something like that. So it has these wavy patterns, it looks like circles. But I think it's actually caused by some kind of massive blast that struck the Earth, like an energy blast between, say, maybe the moon and the Earth. I'm just speculating, but something like that. I don't think that it's some kind of formed structure. I certainly don't think it's Atlantis, I think Matthew's idea with the structure in the Azores is the correct solution there. But I don't think research structure is Atlantis. I think it's some sort of weird electromagnetic blast type thing, something like that.
We need to talk to Dave. Dave Stig Hansen's in the chat, and he's actually been there. He's been inside the Rishat structure and filmed videos. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just so... one of the things that interests me with the Atlantis thing is that a lot of the research seems to assume that it's one center, one city. And I remember when we had Chris Tolworthy on, and he was talking about that, we need to broaden our thinking about Atlantis. Think about it as more of a series or a worldwide or a continent-wide civilization,
Oh, yeah. I'd agree with that completely. I think this is the thing. When people talk about Atlantis, on the one hand, they might be thinking about a gigantic island continent, but really we're talking about the city. We're talking about the dimensions that Plato gives, and that's what that structure is that I think that Matthew found. I do think that there are other structures, like there's a pyramid in the Azores. I did an analysis of that one, and that's on my website, linked to the Atlantis one. And there's also, I think, something going off in Bimini. It wouldn't surprise me if there's stuff there. I do, as I said, it's like a global thing, but it was destroyed, and on my website, that's where I have that big article, and I show you it was a very precise, very special alignment that destroyed it. Was it 96, 12 or 21? I can't remember. It's one of them when the alignment occurs. And it's this very special alignment involving an alignment of Mars, Venus, the Sun, and Mercury, where the Earth's near the Pleiades. And in that particular alignment, it had a contributing conjunction of Ceres, Sun, and Jupiter. Very powerful. And that's what caused the devastation. And this is why, when people talk about, I know Plato gives the take on it that the Atlanteans were a massive warlike structure. I would disagree a bit on that. And what I'm saying is, I'm just going to say, this is something it's the same thing with the invasion of Ireland, in 1896, I think it was, or 97 BC, by the Tuatha De Danann. When you have these planetary alignments which are going to cause devastation, these esoteric calendars reveal decisively that people have foreknowledge of this. So if you have foreknowledge there's going to be a global disaster or something, you might be thinking about where the hell do you go for safety? What if you thought your island was uniquely vulnerable, say? You'd want to escape. And I think that this Atlantean war drive was actually part of a desperate attempt to escape, but they had to go to other lands. And if you're going to show up en masse, a big group, to another land, they're going to say, hey, we're being invaded here. And I think that story, I think Atlantis, partly, that war that was started was because they had foreknowledge of the disaster and they needed to get somewhere they thought was they need to disperse. I think that was definitely a part of it. I don't think that they were, 100% warlike for the sake of it, because Plato says the war was still going on, and then it sunk both armies, the Atlanteans and all they were up against, the Athenians and whatever. Again, we know Athens, we know that that's more of an ancient Greek thing. Plato may be using the names, of Athens, but he's referring to something proto-Athenian. You know what I mean? We just use it because maybe geographic, that's the area that we're in.
Well, he had to relate the story for his audience as well, didn't he?
He's got to relate it for his audience, but I do think that that's part of it. The same thing's like with the remote viewing thing that Courtney Bratton. Did you ever see that Farsight Institute, the remote viewing one? He called it Atlantis, but he was talking about the destruction about 70,000 BC. And Courtney Brown was saying something similar. Remote viewing saw a big disaster, and he thought that some military experiment had been done to cause the destruction. And I don't think that at all. I think that it was done to try to save the Earth. I think that the thing about these disasters, they involve a resonant agitation of the Earth, and they involve energy being transferred between celestial bodies. And I think that they were trying to have a kind of release valve to somehow deal with some of these energies to save the planet. I think that there's a lot of times in the past when we've been confronted by this. And same with the Atlanteans, they talk about using some crystal technology and whatever, they all went awry. And all I'll say is maybe they used that crystal technology in an attempt to shift the energies around so that the Earth would not be affected. And again, it just went wrong, or the device was overwhelmed. I think that's a distinct possibility. So I'm not massively hard on the Atlanteans. I just think that you could interpret this a couple of different ways here, that they ended up desperately trying to escape and disperse, which led to the big war. And they may have been using their technology to try to alleviate the energy effects to the Earth, but again, didn't work. So again, it's just the way that it seems to be interpreted. It's like they're like 100% evil, but I think it's more nuanced, if you ask me.
Yeah, like most things. What do you make of? Have you seen this guy? He's got a YouTube, the Dutch guy who seemed to have predicted the recent earthquake in Turkey and Syria.
I am about to do a video on this earthquake. I talking. What's his name? It begins with D, doesn't it? What is it?
I'm blanking on it now. Yeah.
I know it's like an element in it, periodic table. What's his name? Yeah, I know he's talking about. I've seen his work from a few videos a few years ago. I did look into earthquakes a while ago, and I've looked into solar flares, and earthquakes are the same kind of thing. You've got to model it correctly, and I don't believe the guy's modeling it correctly. What you're looking at are the straight line distances connecting up pairs of celestial bodies, and you're looking for those special harmonic relations, like what I gave you with the Bravo and King test. I said you've got this arc length here. If you divide it by 8 and then you multiply by 3, you get the same arc length to the King-Sun relation, yeah? And so these kinds of relations, you're looking for wavelength measures that fit harmoniously into two components that are quite large. You're looking for special ratios present. And whereas conjunction patterns can be a guide to great disasters, and they certainly are, a lot of the earthquakes that we have can be special harmonic relations between pairs of celestial bodies which are not even in alignment. I've done an analysis of this Turkish earthquake, and I'm going to be putting it out there on my own YouTube channel and show you some of the relations, because I do think that it is a very important one. I think the universal time was 1 hour, 17 minutes, 35 seconds at 6th of February, just go top of my head, because I pulled it into Starry Night and I was working all the distances. I've done the entire analysis. I'm just going to do the audio for the video. I've got the slideshow and everything. I could practically do a slideshow right now in front of you if you wanted to. I think I've got the slides. But yeah, it's just have a look at this just for a moment. Let me just see. See now. I don't know where I've got it.
I'll be getting an exclusive here.
No.
Maybe not. Depends if the tech works.
No, there's a few I've done, you see. There's a few where can't remember where I've got it here.
Don't worry about it, Kate.
I think it's it's a very fascinating one. But yeah, it's another, that guy that he's talking about though. let me tell you something interesting about earthquakes, because somebody asked me about earthquake forecasting. Let me tell you, there's a lot of gurus out there that have got website or YouTube channels 24/7 devoted to earthquakes. And here's the thing about earthquake forecasting for me, right? And I'm just going off the top of my head. We know earthquakes, you could go, say, to the USGS. And if you were to look from like today's date back exactly 365 days, 1 year, right? And you have to say, okay, search for all earthquakes 6.0 and above that occurred over a 1 year period, okay? How many do you think there are? And the answer is a few hundred. In fact, I think it works out at something like, is it now? You get about a couple of hundred or so, such that on average, you'll get a 6.0 earthquake occurring somewhere, I think once every 4 days or something like that. It's just insane. It's very frequent on average, statistically speaking, the 6.0 and above. So if somebody ever says to you, I'm going to make a forecast for a 6.0 earthquake, and they tell you a precise time in the future, okay, and they say it's 6 months from now, and you say it's like at 12 noon on this precise date, and then they tell you, my margin of error is plus or minus 2 days.
Yeah.
Straight away, they've given you a 4-day range. Statistically, an earthquake occurs every... In other words, it's random chance, isn't it? You know what I mean? Yeah. And so this is why, if you're going to be getting serious about it, you've got to start looking at earthquakes like 7.0 and above. It's an exponential type scale, and I believe they occur on average one every... the total amount you get every year is about 14 or 15. So, it might be 13 or whatever. There can be like one every 20 days or something like that, so it's one every 20 days. So if somebody says to you, okay, I want to predict a 7.0 earthquake, and then they say what the date and time is, and then they say plus or minus 2 days. Well, say plus or minus 1 day, so it's a 2-day range, yeah? In that case, if it's 20 days on average, you're going to get one, and it's 2 days, it's like 1 in 10 chance of being right. Now, I think I might get a bit lucky, but if they did that several times in a row and you multiply it up, the odds of them getting successes in multiple times, you'd be thinking, my God, this guy knows what he's talking about. A lot of these earthquake people, I see like that, they're not sticking their neck out for me and having like a rigorous forecast where they specify, I'm interested in earthquakes, this magnitude and above. And they say, this is where I think it's going to, one's going to occur this time. They give us a specified error range, and then they put it out publicly. I am not aware of anybody sticking their neck out and literally doing that. I mean, some of the videos where I see, they do like commentary, like weather forecast, and they say, we had a 5.0 here and another one at this. And I'm thinking, you get them like every bleeding day, you know what I mean? Yeah. I think some of it's just filler nonsense. So I'm not impressed by a lot of what they say, because I think they've got to like do it in such a way that they are really upfront about it, and their technique is well defined, and then you could at least see if they've got a track record.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think there's so many people out there. If you were to evaluate a lot of these guys' work, I think they're no better than chance. Most of them,
I thought it was interesting that there was that solar anomaly around the same time that the top of the northern solar pole. There seemed to be some discharge, a big discharge happening around the same time as the earthquake.
I don't know about that. You mean the Turkey one?
Yeah, just this week. Yeah, there was something. There was a headline like the sun just blew its top. There was like a big solar discharge on the north.
I think maybe there was a suspicious observers video about that. Yeah, it's just one of the infrared filter. Well, I think it was the red filter one where there's something. Yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah.
I mean, we just don't seem to take account of how connected everything is in our day-to-day lives. In a celestial manner.
Oh, yeah, I do. I think the thing about earthquakes is that when we look at the sun is like naked to us, effectively. And through certain filters, we can see the sunspots on the sun, we can see things like that. For me, that kind of activity is occurring literally under the crust of the Earth. And whereas you might think of sunspots, I think we have like Earth spots, if you want to put it that way. And whereas you think of solar flares, I think we have like Earth flares which occur, and they're what trigger the earthquakes underneath that interact with the crust. That's what I think is actually going on, because the same kinds of celestial relations that can trigger solar flares trigger earthquakes, because it's the same phenomena, basically. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, cool. Oh, Keith, we've done well over an hour already. I don't know where the time's gone.
Yeah, so yeah.
You'll have to come back and do some more. And once I've read your book, it's not come yet. I ordered it.
Oh yeah, I've got it packaged up right here.
Have you signed it? Have you signed it?
Oh yeah, yes, I have. I signed them all. Yes.
Oh,
I've signed them all. Yeah, this is what you're getting.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. There it is.
There it is.
There you go. Give you a big picture.
I'm going to be sending it off tomorrow at post office service. I couldn't do it yesterday, but so it should be there coming to you.
There's the cover there. Who's the lady on the front, Keith? Just for my own.
It's a professional model, actually.
Right. And is she in Yorkshire as well? No comment. No comment.
I think she's in Germany, actually.
Oh, all right, too far. Never mind. Well, Keith, I mean, where's the best place for people to go? Is it to the website?
Yeah, loststagesecrets.com. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put links in the show notes for everyone.
Yeah, I did with all kinds of topics, like as I said, Earth grid stuff, earthquakes, nuclear weapons, secrets, bases like NSA stuff as well. So it's all connected mathematically, and also cycles of destruction is my real interest. Though we never got into that, but that's
next time.
That's the one.
And would that be linked to precession by any chance?
I could say a hell of a lot about it. In my book, there's a special chapter on precession, and I talk. Let me tell you an interesting point about precession. If you'd ask me when did it start, when I look at in my book, I talk about the Earth having once had 360 days per year. You've got rates of change for the Earth going back in time from current value to 360, right? And I look at how that changes relative to the moon moving away from the Earth, because if you go back in time, it was closer, and then the Earth was a bit more shrunk. Yeah, so I look at the rates of change of all these things. And it turns out that the time period when the Earth had 360 days per year was roughly about 250-ish million years. Yeah. Well, the significance of that is, how when people talk about massive geological disasters in the past, so these millions of year cycles, like the dinosaurs were wiped out 65 million years ago, there's a big massive event that occurred 250 million years ago when the Earth's crust cracked and the whole thing, right? Very fascinating. When you look at a lot of sci-fi movies, they say to you, well, guess what? We get these blasts from supernova, stars explode around us, and the shockwave hits the Earth, and that's what triggers these disasters. But as a matter of fact, whereas that can be true, there's another aspect to it. You see, what can also cause massive shockwaves is not just the destruction of stars, but the birth of stars, the ignition event, the fusion event that causes them to fuse together, and that causes the massive outward explosion, right?
Right.
If I were to ask you to pick a star in the background star constellation, which just happens to have a birthday of around 250 million years ago, would you like to take a wild guess which star it is?
Let's say Alpha Centauri.
Oh, Sirius.
I was going to say
Sirius.
Sirius.
But Sirius is a binary.
Well, you've got Sirius A, you've got Sirius B, and you've got that little small Sirius C, sorry.
Yeah.
The main bright one is Sirius A. And I think there are, 50 astronomical units distance from one another. And one, I think, is two sun masses, and the other one is half. But either way, the Sirius B one, I think, has got a birth, is younger, and that's about 235 million or something. And Sirius A is 242 million plus or minus 7 million years. But here's the thing. Sirius is our binary companion, right? It's responsible for precession. And so what we had was an ideal solar system circa 250 million years ago. the Earth has 360 days per year. All the planets are aligned. I even give you the precise orbital periods for all the ideal planets, And there was an ignition event which gave birth to Sirius, right? Firstly, Sirius A. That fusion event, right, is what caused the destabilization of our solar system from this incredible harmony. And, I think we were originally, because our sun is something like, 4.6 billion years or something. So our star is far older than Sirius. I think we were orbiting directly around Arcturus. And Sirius, when it ignited, if it had ignited like nearer to Arcturus, it would have had its own independent separate orbit around it, just like we have. But because it ignited and was created too close to us, we got caught into a binary system. And that's when precession started. I think that's some of these details that I'm aiming to add into my new book, because I only discovered them after this book was published, But that connection to Sirius was mind-blowing when I realized that the birth, the ages that the astronomers have found is 242 million plus or minus. And it just seems to match these ratios, these rates of change that harmonize the solar system back to its ideal. Amazing stuff, that one.
I feel totally vindicated now, because about 2 years ago, I posited in the Brothers of the Serpent Discord channel that we might be in a binary system with Sirius, and they laughed me out of there and mocked me. And
Sirius is the only star that does not precess. That's the key factor. That's the key. You must have that.
Plus, you've got the Dogon, the Sothic calendar of Egypt. The ancient Egyptians were all over Sirius.
Yeah.
It was the most important thing in the sky, you could argue. Yeah. But yeah. Oh, I love it. Right. I can't wait for your book. It's going straight to the top of my list.
Wow.
Next one on the list.
That's big news in itself.
Yeah. Right. Well, this has been amazing, Keith. Thanks for coming again.
Yeah.
And I'll hopefully talk to you again soon. Check out the links in the show notes, as always. And follow up. Check out Keith's upcoming video on the recent disaster. And we'll see you in briefly for part 2.
Yeah.
In 10 minutes or so. Okay. Stay on the line for us for 1 minute, Keith.
Yeah.
And we'll catch the rest of you on the flip side. Okay. Sayonara.